Hi friends, we finally got a story from the Outlands for Bangalore. We now know Bangalore's full backstory, and I'm going to cover it in this video just to make it easy for you to enjoy. Anita Williams, call sign Bangalore, is from the planet Gridiron. In fact, her whole family is from the planet Gridiron. This includes her 4 brothers as well as her parents. She was born into an IMC military family, and they all served in the IMC army. Sergeant First Class Anita Williams has always been an exceptional soldier, even since she was young. She was top of her class at the IMC Military Academy, and the only cadet who could take apart a peacekeeper, equip it with a precision choke hop-up, and put it back together in under 20 seconds, blindfolded. Part of this came from Bangalore's competitiveness. She always had to be the best, and I guess being the only girl out of 4 brothers had something to do with this mentality. Her and her siblings would often compete to try and be the best, even when they were kids. They would do things like race to eat their vegetables first. It wasn't in a mean or malicious way though. This was part of their DNA as Williamses. Bangalore and Jackson had a special competitive relationship. They even had a scorecard that they would use to keep track of who won when they completed their challenges or dared each other to do something. And this scorecard was a race to 100, with the winner being declared the better Williams sibling. In a way, it was how they bonded. It's what made them close. It's what made them family. Towards the start of Bangalore's early days, she completed boot camp for basic training in 2715. She went through it with her older brother Jackson. That was the day of their graduation, and also the day they found out Typhon was destroyed. Sadly, this included their older brother's death, who was on Typhon as a scientist at the time. He was the only Williams not to be a soldier. The death of Zeke is significant because it fueled Bangalore's rage at the militia. Interesting side note, the Williams family always throw a party every time one of their family leaves for an assignment. The party ends in the immediate family having one last beer, and they make a bracelet out of bottle caps. When or if that Williams then dies, people know to take their dog tags, but always leave the bottle caps on. These bottle caps will guide them back to each other one day. They also play the footage from the party at that Williams funeral, so the happy times are remembered and not the sad ones. Anyway, back to Bangalore's rage for the militia. She wanted blood after her brother's death, and Jackson realised this. He didn't want her to leave alone, as he couldn't face losing a sister after already losing a brother. As such, Jackson put in a transfer request to be in her squad. He followed Bangalore on her first assignment, the IMS Hestia. After Typhon, all IMC resources were called back to Gridiron, and that became the last IMC stronghold in the frontier. It was also the location of the last battle in the frontier. You see, the militia surrounded Gridiron, and at this point the Apex Predators, including Blisk, had left the IMC, as had the remnant fleet, meaning the IMC were under-resourced and looking for a Hail Mary play. The IMS Hestia was docked at this time. During a fight on the ground, Bangalore fought with a militia pilot got injured. She was taken aboard the Hestia by her brother Jackson, where there was a skeleton crew with something from the labs that was saved before Typhon was destroyed. Bangalore wasn't sure what this was, but it was supposed to be something that could change the tide of the war. Of course, Bangalore wanted to stay and fight, but instead Jackson saw the defeat of the IMC looming and told the crew to use the technology to amplify the phase shift to transport the Hestia away from the battle and, in theory, to safety. Bangalore was out for the entire journey from Gridiron to the Outlands, which is normally a 20-year journey. However, the technology from Typhon, along with the phase shifter, allowed them to make the trip in a year. The other issue was when they made it to the Outlands, the technology they used was dead. Any return journey to Gridiron would take 20 years. There's more to this story though. You see, Jackson and Bangalore lived in the Outlands after the first Hestia crash landed on Storm Point. Bangalore was out for a long time and wasn't happy that Jackson had forced him to leave the battle though, and recorded a distress signal calling for IMC rescue as soon as she realised what had happened. There was something called the blackout though, possibly from the technology they used to get to the Outlands, and it meant no satellites or comms could get messages from the Outlands to Gridiron or the other planets in the frontier. Luckily, some engineers in the Syndicate planets were able to come up with a way to use the old systems to still enable communications within the Syndicate planets, even with the blackout. An IMC pilot would eventually show up on Storm Point and track down Bangalore and her brother. Of course, Jackson had fled the battle with the crew of the Hestia, and so he was a fugitive, and in essence a traitor to the IMC. Therefore, this pilot was going to shoot Jackson. But of course, Bangalore wouldn't let that happen. She stepped in front of her brother with her gun. So instead, the general fired rockets on the town full of innocent lives, where the Williams were staying. This led to Bangalore and her brother fighting the pilot. After the pilot wall ran and boosted Bangalore into the air with his jump jets, she grabbed his pilot's data knife and sent them tumbling to the ground. She would fight the pilot with her brother Jackson, and eventually the two would emerge victorious over the pilot, and Bangalore acquiring a pilot's knife, her heirloom, in the process. Jackson feared that the IMC would keep hunting him though for fleeing the Battle of Gridiron. Bangalore wasn't going to leave her brother alone and said she would stay with him as they evaded the IMC. The two of them boarded the dead pilot's ship, and this would eventually become the Hestia 2. Sometime later in space, travelling around the Outlands, a grenade made contact with the outer hull of the Hestia. To this day, they aren't really sure what happened. What Bangalore does know is that it ripped the hull off the Hestia, breaking the airlock. Jackson, like any older brother would, shielded Bangalore, sacrificing his own life to save hers. Anita could only watch helplessly as her brother was sucked out into the vacuum of space. To some, seeing your brother sucked out into space and tumbling towards a planet would assume he was dead, but Bangalore never gave up hope that her brother was still alive. After this, Anita would look for both work and the brother she refused to believe had died. Currently, she's fighting in the Apex games, as you well know, to raise money in the hopes of finding a pilot willing to take the epic trek back home to reunite her with what remains of her family. She even attempted to transmit a message home to her parents. Another sad part to this story is Bangalore doesn't really know what happened to Gridiron thanks to the blackout, meaning she doesn't actually know if her parents or her brothers are still alive. And that's essentially the full story of Bangalore. It's a sad story of a girl and a soldier stranded away from her family with great loss. But she hasn't given up, and one day we hope she will get to see her family and her brother Jackson once again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.